Okay, hello and welcome to today's Journal Club. The discussion is going to be on cannabidiol, an alternative analgesic to dental pain. Sounds pretty interesting. Joining us today are two physicians and a researcher, Dr. Phil Molloy, who's a rheumatologist who has retired but continues to be very active in caring for patients despite retiring. Dr. Len Kamen from Jefferson University. He's a clinical director of Moss Rehab Outpatient Center, the PA Pain Society in Pennsylvania, and the head of the Rothman Opioid Foundation. And then Dr. Jahan Marcu, who will be leading the discussion with Dr. Phil Molloy and Len Kamen, is a esteemed cannabinoid researcher who's worked in this scientific area for almost 20 years, has recently published a book entitled Regulated Cannabis and Hemp Market Navigation. You should check it out. I think it's available in Barnes & Noble. Next slide, let's see. All right, for those of you new to our program, I'm the CEO of Physicians Research Center Plus. Unfortunately, I can't be there today, so hence while we're recording this. There's three areas of expertise. SALIS is our phase 2 through 4 clinical study pillar. It's probably our longest. It's been around for probably over 30 years. Our analytic section is Buds Info, and then Cerium is our education pillar. And Cerium's designed for the busy healthcare provider who really wants to understand cannabis and its derivatives through the lens of science and to be able to have a conversation with a patient. All right, so if you have already done this, thank you so much. If you have not, please scan this QR code. It helps us try to understand, ask a bunch of questions about cannabis and your knowledge, and
All right, thank you everyone, and off we go. So the Cerium Journal Club, our purpose here is to support healthcare professionals with discussions of published research, and we do our best to approach each paper with consistency, fairness, and transparency. Again, the purpose is to educate and raise awareness. We're not recommending any policy or regulatory decisions. If you'd like to receive more updates, a newsletter, stay engaged, feel free to leave your email address in the chat. And we encourage you to share this invite with any of your colleagues. Phil, want to tell us about the subject today?
Yeah, dear to my heart. I come from a family of dentists. I was a straight person who went to medical school, not dental school in my family. I think I didn't go to dental school because I'm terrified of dental pain. And it's a big issue and it's a big day-to-day headache for the dental practitioners, how to deal with pain. Next slide. So, yeah, visits to the dentist are often triggered by pain or associated with pain. Dental healthcare providers, dentists, and the allied professionals in the dental world, like all of us, would like to avoid opioids in the short term, yet they're prescribed in 30%, as you can see here. There are alternatives to strong opioids. There are weak opioids, paratramadol, and NSAIDs. Some people either can't take NSAIDs or they don't work. So there are definitely unmet needs in the dental world. The dentists spend a lot of hand-wringing on their part dealing with pain and patient anxiety. See that all firsthand. I'm sure we've all seen that, actually. Okay, next. So the article today is CBD, cannabidiol as an alternative analgesic for acute dental pain. So this isn't chronic, this is acute. I hope you have all downloaded the article, saved it, look at it a little bit later, have it open if you want during this presentation. Um, you're going to make a few comments about CBD. Want to, is that the next slide, Jahan?
Oh, yes. So these slides
Yeah.
are courtesy of Ethan Russo. So we got a couple slides about CBD. So why would we be interested in utilizing CBD in a clinical study or dentistry study? Well, CBD has been around for a while. It was actually purified and isolated before THC by an American chemist, and later confirmed in Israel by Raphael Mechoulam. Um, it tends to work as a negative allosteric modulator at CB1 receptors. THC stimulates CB1 receptors. CBD seems to decrease that efficiency of that interaction. CBD also has its own neuroprotective antioxidant properties, and in a 1998 study, it outperforms vitamin C and E in this regard. It's also known to be a TRPV1 agonist, which is the same target of things like capsaicin, the active ingredient in chili peppers. It's also known to inhibit the uptake of anandamide, thus increasing anandamide where CBD is going about its business. CBD has notable anticonvulsant properties, as well as notable anti-anxiety properties in clinical settings. And if you're noticing this little picture here, this is actually a picture courtesy of Ethan Russo of CBD-rich trichomes, for those of you who are trichome fans from the cannabis plant. Many of you will know that because of its anticonvulsant properties, CBD was, in a purified form from cannabis, approved as epidemiologist by the FDA. There's also some interesting activities at the serotonergic receptors, 5-HT1A. And I always like to make a point when people want to talk about this to make sure you talk about the right one, the right receptor, the 1A, because 5-HT2A is the target of things like psilocybin and LSD. So the numbers here are very important when we talk about the activity of a substance on the human body. But 5-HT1A may explain why we see this improvement in anxiety scores with CBD as well. There's also been some interesting stuff at adenosine receptors, which are also a target of things like caffeine, and some interesting research about prion accumulation and neuronal toxicity. And if this is the first time you've heard about CBD and you're unaware that there are tons of CBD products out there, you might be the missing link. I think that recently paleontologists have just discovered the last surviving human who has not been exposed to a CBD product advertising. He's been living a quiet life using a 2000 ad blocker, and mostly living a secluded life. But some of us do remember what it's like to live in a pre-CBD world. It's like those of us who walked with the dinosaurs at this point. So, Phil, why do we care about all this? I've just gone down
Well,
the CBD rabbit hole.
yes. And, we alluded earlier, dentists deal with acute pain frequently on a daily basis and are reluctant and cautious, especially in the past decade, as we all are, in starting people on opioids. You might say to yourself, well, what's the big deal for an acute problem giving somebody some opioids just for a number of days? It's not trivial, the percentage of patients who are on acute opioids who turn into chronic opioid users. It's a significant percentage. The number of tablets dispensed, the number of days supply, and the number of refills are very consistently shown to be associated with those who are still on opioids months or even a year later. So even that first prescription for an acute problem, a percentage of people will get into trouble with opioid use disorder. Standard Pain relievers don't work on everyone, and not everyone can take them. CBD does have some basic science and preclinical and early clinical and other models, both animal models and human models. There is some suggestive evidence that CBD may offer an option for pain relief. Been not greatly studied until the past few years in dental pain, however. Patients, if CBD did work, then we would not need the other options, NSAIDs and opioids, if CBD worked and had a good safety profile. So let's see what we can learn about it from this study. We'll go to the next one.
All right. So this study had an interesting design. It was placebo controlled. So Phil, do you want to tell us a little bit about what stands out to you about this design?
Well, the highlights of the design are, first of all, it's a well done study, as you'll see. It's very important, especially when endpoints have to do with things that are difficult to measure, pain, anxiety, some softer or mental health endpoints. And in fact, the FDA requires a placebo arm to get approval for anything that has to do with pain, because the mind is very powerful in terms of expecting your expectations are strongly influenced. Anyone who's done a lot of research on pain studies know that the placebo arm in virtually all the studies out there are about half, placebo is about half as good as the active substance in most studies. So there are 61 patients enrolled. They're adults. They all presented to the same clinic with acute dental problems. We do show the inclusion and exclusion criteria. They're interesting, and I hope you have a comment about them. Moderate to severe pain, at least 3 on a scale of 10, at least 30 millimeters on a 100 millimeter scale. And we can look at the inclusion and exclusion criteria. But think about this one. You have to have a negative baseline urinary drug test. You can't come into this study and be evaluated to see if CBD works if you're testing positive for cannabis in your urine or other abusable substances. So let's look at the inclusion exclusion. I think we added that slide, didn't we, or did we?
It's coming up soon.
Okay.
But to
All right.
let
So there,
Yeah, go ahead.
well, yeah, we'll go over the interventions here. Um, one dose of CBD, a second dose of CBD, and a placebo. And do you want to talk about the vehicle and how they made it all taste the same, Jahan? I know that you read that in detail. You
Well,
thought it was kind of
basically,
interesting.
they wanted to kind of hide what people were getting so they could kind of blind people. So they basically used a kind of a sweet solution to hide the taste of the drugs, Epidiolex, to make everything kind of taste the same. So everyone kind of got this sweet tasting, same texture, same color product. Um, and so that to perhaps limit any expectancy bias that people might be experiencing. And they gave them 10 milligrams per kg, 20 milligrams per kilogram, or placebo. And as I've learned that 20 milligrams per kilogram, I was wondering how many molecules of CBD that is, and it's something like 16 quadrillion. So I think 20 milligrams per kilogram is easier to say than that. But um,
Yeah.
but again, you have to do a little bit of math here to figure out that it is a significant amount of CBD in terms of, some people might have been getting hundreds of milligrams.
In case anybody's wondering, this is a single dose study. One dose followed for hours. It's an acute study. So here's more on the design. Epidiolex was FDA approved for seizures, childhood seizures in 2018, 7 years ago. It's extracted so-called pure CBD, if there is such a thing. Data were collected at multiple time points before any dosing, and it's 7 subsequent time periods, as you can see, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes. 90, 120, and 180 minutes, 3 hours after drug administration. It was the 3 hour time frame was selected based on what we know about the um, pharmacokinetics of this drug. It was a rescue medicine that is common in most studies. Either acetaminophen with codeine or ibuprofen were available to these subjects. Usually, to get something past the IRB, the Investigational Research Board, to get IRB approval and subject rights, you need to have an investment. If there's a placebo arm, you're supposed to have a rescue arm. All
And
right, let's look at any other comments, Jahan, on that?
yeah, one thing I would just add about Epidiolex is that it typically comes in a 100 milliliter bottle, and its concentration is 100 mg per milliliter. So 3 milliliters would be like 300 milligrams if you're doing math at home. The other thing about, just want to comment on the endpoints here. They would ask people to compare their pain levels before they entered the study. How would you rate your, tooth pain at the moment? And they would categorize these as reduced, similar, or increased based on these baseline questions they were asking. And so, who did they include in the study? Well, we know about how they designed it. They have this design. Now, who do they let into the study? And, Phil, when we were talking earlier, I thought it was a really great observation. And I think one we should perhaps discuss now or later on when people start asking questions, is a negative test for recent cannabis use and other drugs of abuse, including alcohol. So if you're nervous before you go to the dentist, don't have a drink to calm your nerves. I thought a negative test result for cannabis use would be interesting to learn more about their threshold test, what that was. But this made me wonder if they know something, maybe we don't, that maybe CBD is more effective in some instances when there aren't other cannabinoids around in terms of noticing its impact. But there were definitely other things where it was that they did have some self-reported, or exclusion criteria would be self-reported experience inhaling cannabis. So they were really looking at kind of cannabis naive people for this study, it seemed like.
That's an important point to focus on because previous journal clubs we've looked at the safety and side effect profiles, like driving under the influence of cannabis. And daily seasoned users have a different impairment experience than naive users. Um, it's very important for both the efficacy and the adverse effect side of things if you're a daily user. So this study basically tried to recruit naive patients.
So the study design, basically the primary outcome were these visual analog scales. And so these could be rating it on a 1 to 10, could be smiley faces. There's a number. If you put it into your favorite search browser, visual analog scale, you'll see a number of different ones that can be used for different reasons. Another thing that was interesting that I found really interesting was they looked at change in bite force, and they had a digital bite transducer that was validated in another study. And I thought this was pretty interesting. So not only are they doing the normal survey routine stuff, please rate your pain before, after, during, they also had a physical measurement, which I thought was a great thing because if you can't, if you're having trouble biting into a sandwich, a dental procedure, knowing that it improves that outcome could be really important. And also, of course, several questionnaires about perceptions about mood alterations, feeling high, and then as well as collecting any adverse event data that might have surfaced. So I thought this was a pretty cool design. I had never heard of a digital bite transducer before, so I think it's an interesting tool to be used.
And to anticipate the data, which you're going to see in the subsequent slides, the data is going to be presented as raw pain. Is your pain Did it start at a 6 out of 10 and now it's a 5 out of 10? So the raw data. Also, the percentage is going to be presented as the percentage of your baseline pain. Everybody is starting with a different level of pain. So I'm down 10%, 20%, 30%. And the third way the data will be presented are the patients who are asked to just say, is your pain better, worse, or the same? Yeah, one, two, or three, better, worse, or the same. So those were the ways of attacking the primary outcome measurement, and we'll see them right now.
So this is figure 1A, and this simply shows how pain levels changed over time for patients in three groups. A placebo group in the black solid line. We have CBD 10 milligrams in blue, and then we have 20 milligrams, the danger zone, the highest dose, 20 milligrams. And so this y-axis here represents the visual analog scale. Higher values in this instance mean more pain. And the x-axis represents minutes. So these are 90 minutes, 120, 80. And we see that both CBD groups seem to have a similar reduction in pain. CBD 20 milligrams seem to have a faster onset. But Phil, what would you make of this? You got 10 milligrams here and then 20 milligrams.
It's tempting to look at these graphs and say, so which is better? I'm a dentist. Am I going to use the lower dose or the higher dose? And this reminds me of a horse race where one horse gets out in the lead. The blue arm, if you just looked at the first hour, it looks like, oh, maybe it's better. But then as the time, remember, it's a single dose study, but as 2 hours and 3 hours comes by and the cumulative area under the curve, the higher dose seemed to outperform it. The two onset times are when there was a measurable onset that was statistically different from their baseline level of pain, which is seen better on the next slide. Um, but be thinking, are you impressed that there's a difference between the blue line or the red line? Do you think 20 is better? Do you think 10 is just as good? Let's see what the other ways of presenting this data. Let's look. So figure 1B, this is the percentage. So everybody starts at 100% of their pain. This is a different way to present the same data. Their baseline score is called 100% of their pain. And you can see here more clearly that the red line, the higher dose, uh, separates from its baseline level of pain significantly quicker than the lower dose. So one of the things, no matter how you look at this data, when you look at the higher dose, it seems to have a quicker onset of action. Whether that's clinically important enough, you could argue about. Anything else, Jahan, in this slide?
No, I think that's about it. I want to talk
All
about
right.
the bite force change here.
Yeah.
And similarly, with the 10 and 20 milligrams, I think the way you discussed it was excellent. They do start off almost in like a dead heat. And the differences seem to be after an hour and a half, and really apparent, I think, at almost 3 hours here. And what's interesting to me is you look at these things, these error bars are big. So there probably are some people who took 20 or 10 milligrams and had a very similar experience. But the potential statistical significant improvement in bite force from 20 milligrams, I think that's a pretty impressive despite the variation from person to person. This is again in almost a approaching the top of the charts here with the 250, maybe it's 225% increase over the normal bite force scale here. So you might, again, if you've ever had either jaw injury or toothache and you're biting into something, even an apple or a thick breaded sandwich, it might be like, oof, can't do that. And here they're really taking a bite out of lunch. Like I'm gonna say this is a very interesting improvement. A little
And,
disappointing to see that placebo and CBD performing 10 milligrams are performing about the same, but definitely CBD 20 milligrams per kilogram seem to have much greater improvement in bite force compared to placebo, which offers an interesting speculation that it's not just pain relief, but there might be some restoration of jaw function. Maybe it's through anti-inflammatory effects, maybe it's through something else, but I think this is one of the best findings of this study.
And 20 milligrams did separate from 10 for efficacy, but the 10 did not separate, as Jahan said, for placebo statistically. All right, should we get to the toughest graph?
Oh, well,
Oh no.
we'll catch our breath here and just talk about what we saw so far, and then we're going to look at their most challenging graph that they have in the paper and walk you through it. But just just to sum up, and Phil, you're welcome to jump in, and folks, you
Mhm.
can again, we can always go back and look at any of the slides. We have the paper on deck if there are questions. CBD 10 milligrams. Again, the onset was about 30 minutes for relief, 20 milligrams about 15. The pain continued to decline at 50% reduction, almost 2 hours at CBD 10 and 1 hour reliably at CBD 20 milligrams. And max pain relief, all groups was at about the 120-minute mark. So including even the placebo. So
57% of placebo means they were, let's say, one-third better on placebo, whereas the two active groups were, 73 and 77% improved. That's another way of saying it. In case you're confused, 27% of baseline means 73% better.
excellent. Thank you for that clarification. I like
Yeah.
that. Why didn't the authors write it like
Yeah.
that?
All right.
So moving on to this next one. And when we first saw this, we were like, what is the take-home message here? We have to figure this out. So it's an interesting graph. You don't normally see data presented like this. So what you'll notice is that this is for the placebo drug, CBD10, CBD20. Let's just focus on, A, B, and C right now. And so when you see blue, it means people reported increases in pain over time. If you see the gray area is the percent of people who experience similar pain. And remember, we have 100% of the study population, or the placebo group represented here. And it sort of gives you a sense at what time point what people were experiencing. So at 15 minutes after getting placebo, 25% said they had a pain intensity decrease. Um, and while you're looking at here, you see that there is a frequency here of increased pain and up until even at 2 hours in the placebo group, which you do not see any blue in either of these groups. So you either see, generally speaking, well, I had similar pain than I had when I had the drug, and you see that there's a little bit of a group that has similar pain. Similarly, in the CBD 20 milligrams. But you see the same thing again. You see a much quicker onset with CBD 20. You see a much slower onset with CBD 10 milligrams, although it looks a little bit more like a plateau here, where this seems to get right up and go up and down a little bit. But I don't know how significant those differences really are.
So this was a different way that subjects were asked, are you better? One, two, or three. Are you better, worse, or the same? And it just occurred to me, if you could take the 10 milligram box and superimpose it on the placebo, the difference in the amount of red bars is the difference between the drug and the placebo. If you took the 20 milligram graph and superimposed it on top of the placebo, the more red that there is on the active one is how much better it is than placebo, roughly. So this way of looking at it doesn't it it doesn't suggest 20 is that much better than 10 when the data is presented this way, as opposed to the line graphs, which did tell a little bit different story, especially 1B. And how about the number needed to treat, Jahan, and the 50% reduction column?
Yeah, so this is another interesting way to think about the data. And this this makes it actually comparable to other things not tested in the study. So number needed to treat NNT, right? This shows a number which represents how many patients need to be treated for one additional patient to experience at least 50% pain relief, right? Because we know you have a study, you give a treatment, not everyone's going to get relief. But it gives us another way of thinking of it. So CBD, 10 milligrams, for every 3.1 patients, you basically means you need about 3 patients who need treatment for one to benefit. Similarly, for CBD 20, you would need about 2.4 patients, which is comparable actually to other standard pain medications like ibuprofen. It's also been found for oxycodone and acetaminophen a little bit lower, 2.3. So I really like this number needed to treat way of thinking about data because it allows us to do, maybe a mini meta-analysis where we can say, okay, well, what is the score for other substances and other treatment modalities and clinical studies now? We don't know how the studies with ibuprofen and oxycodone and acetaminophen were conducted, but they were able to generate values that were similar. So CBD 20 on paper seemed to have an NNT that was similar to things like ibuprofen, which I think is pretty surprising. But again, this is how it performed in cannabis naive folk who were included in the study. We don't really know how this might improve or lessen the efficacy of a treatment if you're actively using a THC-rich preparation or a CBG-rich preparation, just to give some conceptual examples. And so what I think was interesting, again, we're not showing table 2 here, but we're pulling some information from table 2 to provide some context. What was interesting is there was no difference between any of the groups for psychoactive or mood metrics. Very, very surprising. I think with 20 milligrams per kilogram of CBD, they didn't notice much of a prominent effect between that and placebo. And maybe it's because they got a tasty, sugary drink, and and everyone kind of thought, hey, we like sweets. It stimulates the brain, so that might have maybe masks some subtle effect of CBD there.
Well, one thing, Jahan, when people talk about CBD, they always say it's not psychoactive, right?
Yeah, it's true, and I mean maybe I think it does have activity in the brain, but not in the way we think. Although there was some reports of sedation versus placebo.
Yeah.
Interesting. CBD 10 milligrams was this was not reported as being statistically significant, but they did offer this that it was 14 times more likely to experience symptoms of sedation versus placebo, while 20 mg per kg was 8 times as likely. And 10 times more likely to experience diarrhea and abdominal pain. But hey, that's on the warning from the FDA about Epidiolex if you consume a lot of it. So it's not too surprising.
Okay.
And good point from Megan, the trusted cannabis nurse. She says high doses of CBD will be sedating, lower doses more stimulating. Those were extremely high doses. And I know that's a great point. And so we're going to reiterate that. When we say 20 mgs per kg, that's a lot of CBD. Hundreds of milligrams are being administered to people. So these are not, you might see a CBD product in the store that has 10 milligrams total in it. So you might have to eat a whole pile of those to reach the amounts that are administered to these people. Yeah, thank you, Harold, for doing the calculation. 80 mg per kg is high, average male 80 kilograms, so that is 800 milligrams. Thank you, Harold, our numbers man out there on the chat.
All right.
So the study showed that CBD doses led to significant intergroup differences in bite forces. CBD 20 milligrams per kilogram had a significant overall effect compared to placebo, suggesting that CBD can improve tooth function when mechanical allodynia is present. And this can be, a pain sensation, maybe it feels really cold or other sensitivity to things as well. So I thought it was, for me, the bite force was pretty cool, pretty interesting. And Dr. Daniel Stein has a nice little quip for us that the 20 mg per kg group were too busy dealing with their GI issues to appreciate any psychoactivity. Yes, there you go. That yes, when I have
All
GI
right.
issues, it's hard to appreciate anything, for sure. Um, Article summary here. So we believe this is the first randomized controlled trial testing pure CBD for acute dental pain. So a unique study, unique metrics, I think. Um, and they weren't scared to use a high dose of CBD. I definitely think that's been a criticism of other studies and observational work is the amount of CBD that people might be using in or getting exposed to in artisanal preparations. I don't know if this, taking 800 or 1600 milligrams, somewhere between there, depending on how big you are, uh, if CBD is something people can budget out if they're going to the hemp market. That can be quite expensive to purchase if you think about some products have just several milligrams per unit in them. However, if you can get it on prescription in a high dose, that might be more accessible for folks. However, the trade-off here is you get a high dose, a bit more benefit, but potential increase in GI issues as you sort of get in the several hundred to even over 1,000 milligrams. So, and Phil, feel free to jump in anytime.
Yeah.
I know we're getting towards. Oops.
Well,
So,
um, yeah, this is a good conclusion. Um, and we do have a slide coming up later on the strengths and weaknesses. And there's no other arm in this study. Wouldn't you like to know if ibuprofen, how that would have stacked out in terms of GI or in terms of pain or another treatment? So all you have is basically three arms in this study. And it left me saying, I wonder how ibuprofen would have done in another arm. I know you can only do so much with 61 patients. Nonetheless, if you compare the results to this study to what has been published in similar patient groups with similar types of dental pain, even though it's not head-to-head data, you could say that single-dose CBD looks like it is as good as alternative pain regimens right now.
and there are a number of other research studies that we have seen in this area asking similar questions. So just again, if you would like to play the home version of Journal Club and look up some papers, we had considered some of these as well. There was a 2024 study on a preoperative oral CBD-rich extract on anxiety and postoperative pain. Um, this again is using an extract, not a pure CBD. This study had a very well-defined inclusion-exclusion criteria. There's definitely been some folks who have been commenting and reviewing the literature on the potential for CBD as an analgesic for toothache. People have been concerned about frequent cannabis use and its impact on dental health. Some people think that, smoking cannabis can negatively impact implants, but is that the smoke or is that the cannabinoids? Would be good to know. We know that cannabinoids have a lot of activity. Maybe in some instances they're influencing healing in a good way, and other times they might be, you know, increasing the amount of time needed to heal. And again, there are sort of, you say, dueling perspectives, cannabis use and its destructive periodontal diseases among adolescents, and then someone else
Yeah.
publishes the potential application of these products in dentistry. So something is happening here with cannabis products, hemp products, CBD products, and their intersection with dentistry.
The top paper, the one by Silva, enrolled patients that were having an elective root canal. and their endpoints were pain and anxiety. If anybody is interested in this dental thing, that was interesting. We almost picked that article instead of the one we picked because the patients were more uniform and they had pain and anxiety as endpoints. So the next slide shows if you think medical students are poorly receiving formal education on cannabis, it's even worse, I think, in dental programs. And this recent review article um, of both dental hygienists and dental students saying we need to know more about cannabis, basically, not formally addressed.
We'll go to the strengths and weaknesses, and then we'll
Yeah.
try to open it up to some discussion for folks. So just at a high level, there was no non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug arm of the study. It would have been interesting, I think, to have the arm of the study or to have concomitant use of CBD with those things. Do we know if it interferes or enhances? We don't know. And again, no other cannabinoids were tested with or alongside CBD. And this, again, may not apply to your average hemp products. Again, we're talking sky is the limit. There was such a high dose, they used a red line in the graph to indicate it. And were we clear enough about their inclusion exclusion criteria? I think there were some questions about maybe why and what the rationale was regarding that. Big strength here. They blinded it. They blinded it well. One of the difficulties with blinding any cannabis or hemp product is the taste and smell give it away. But they took a well-characterized product, a product that had currently accepted medical use, including, again, recognition from the FDA as well. And they tested it against various procedures and time points. And I thought their outcome measurements were good. Again, thought the bite force measurement was pretty cool. Let's just go back a little bit. So Phil, tell us about these slides.
First of all, unless they're a dentist, um, it's a peripheral in terms of our engagement on a direct level. We are not in charge of pain regimens in our dental patients. But if a patient should ask you, because you have a reputation of being knowledgeable about cannabis and health issues, what would you say? I'm going to have a dental procedure. Um, I would say, I mean, I would say the study is encouraging and positive. And if you can't take NSAIDs and don't want to take opioids, it's an attractive alternative. That's my conclusion.
So, to that, Phil, I'm going to share a comment from the group chat. It's a very interesting name. It's iLens 16 Pro. Hopefully, it's not a iPhone that's come to life and is watching our journal club, but an interesting perspective and comment. 180 minutes of dental pain relief would be inadequate for any sustained post-procedure pain relief and fiscally unsustainable. So I definitely agree with the second half of that statement, which is, if you're trying to get your own CBD products in the commercial market and trying to get 1,000 milligrams of purified CBD that is well tested and thoroughly characterized, yeah, I think it would be prohibitive for the average person to afford that. However, it was a single dose study. So, if you get 3 hours of pain relief and then the drug comes off, I think that opens up a criticism that says these products might work acutely, but we don't know if you take another dose, will it work again? Or is it kind of like a springboard effect and you have to wait a certain amount of time to get that effect again? Like, I mean, do you have thoughts on the 180 minutes of dental pain relief and whether or not another dose would help, or is the time that had an effect significant? Is 3 hours a good chunk, or would you be impressed to see 6 hours?
Yeah, I mean, this is all speculative until I think the most you can say is there's enough information here to tempt you to want to do more studies um, on different products and for longer time periods and with a comparative arm. The
Excellent.
second bullet here, how come a lot of the But wait, there's more slides, those 5 additional studies. How come everybody's using Epidiolex and CBD? Anybody want to take a stab at that? I know Jahan and I have both recently been involved with trying to get a different cannabis product through regulatory IRB uh, stuff. And if it's plant derived or if it's hemp derived, there are just so many regulatory hurdles. And Epidiolex is an FDA approved product, which you can prescribe for someone. So it's easier from a regulatory perspective to study Epidiolex than anything that's whole plant right now.
I definitely think that's one of the reasons that people would choose something like Epidiolex. It's something that the I don't want to insult anyone, but the eggheads over at the IRB review board can wrap their brains around. Like CBD, FDA approved product. This looks like something I'm familiar with. It smells like something I'm familiar with. It has a big warning sheet like something I'm familiar with. So I think it looks and acts and walks like other products that are approved products by the FDA, which makes it easier to fit in to the application, the system, versus saying we're taking these products people are using and we're going to explore them to see what their properties are. They tend to get a little freaked out over that, saying, well, is it a drug? Well, if you're measuring things, maybe it is a drug, maybe it isn't. And so you have to go through more hurdles to explain what you have and your rationale for what you're looking at. And definitely the more you process the material and say, making it not look like the plant, something that naturally occurs on the plant, the more hurdles there are. So if you want to take 3 different cannabis varieties that make different cannabinoids and ratios and combine them together, you're looking at a new drug application versus this is how it naturally occurs on the side of the road in Kentucky. And we're going to mash it up and smoke it in a corncob pipe. Like that is a different level
Yeah,
of scrutiny that comes from a review board.
yeah.
So, oh, thank you, Harold. Harold from Vertosa, a big emulsion expert. He talked about working at cannabinoids at almost any potency level, and he'd be happy to talk maybe about our study. Um, that maybe, and I don't know if it was the potency thing that the IRB was concerned about, but that is an angle we have considered is, was it the delivery system, and maybe emulsion chemistry might be something that they might appreciate more. So we talked about that. We talked about the strengths and weaknesses. So as we open this up and round out and get ready to close the session, just say, did you find these results convincing? Did you believe CBD is as efficacious as other commonly used regimens for acute dental pain? Well, so my official sort of thing is that I did find most of the results pretty convincing. The bite force data, again, was really interesting to me. It's a direct measurement. It's not a survey, which again, surveys are great, but having someone bite on a digital sensor and really put it to the test is really surprising. I would have to see this reproduced with pure CBD, maybe followed for a longer period of time to really believe that it would perform as well as acetaminophen, oxycodone. Like it's hard to believe, but we have data here, right? It's hard to believe this outperforms an opioid formulation. It's hard to believe. Then say I don't believe it. It's just hard to believe.
Yeah.
Well, happy to take any last minute comments. Oh, but would it be expensive since not using FDA's approved diagnosis? Will insurance cover Epidiolex? Great question. It could be expensive to use Epidiolex, but it depends on the study design and their funding. I'm going to think about that for a second. Oh, yes, please go ahead. Thank you for raising your hand.
I have so much to say about this study.
Fantastic. Lay it on us.
Oh my God. All right, I'll turn my camera on. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, I'm a registered nurse. I have a master's degree in medical cannabis therapeutics, and I'm like on the front lines. I have a hemp line, so we are, educating patients. Then we have a product to offer them, and we teach them how to use it. And so many issues with this study that like there's like zero real world applicability to it. Like, first of all, the insurance issue. I mean, we already know that like insurance isn't covering like anything. And of course, there's like Epidiolex is 1,500 bucks a bottle. Like there's insurance is gonna like, of course, prescribe or like cover, the extra strength Motrin and Tylenol and codeine that's a couple bucks over a $1,500 bottle of Epidiolex. And then, the product itself, like that's so much CBD. And if you add like just 1 to 2 milligrams of THC to that, plus like in a whole plant preparation, then you can reduce the dose of CBD by like 90 to 95%. And then of course like the dosing, dental pain obviously like goes beyond 3 hours. People can't eat solid food for a week or two after this. So I think that like I get where they're going. They're trying to fit the pharmaceutical model of pills, but this just doesn't fit that. And I think, yeah, I have a lot of issues with this.
I love the point about, and that's the goal with anything. Can we use less of overall drug to get an effect? And that's one of the things I've loved about researching THC and CBD is, wow, to get this effect with either drug takes a lot of it. But if you start putting them and combining them in different formulations, you can reach that threshold, that reduction, or that outcome that you're measuring using less of both products overall. And that is a great point. And maybe someday we'll see a Marinol Epidiolex blend in one of these studies.
Well, that's what Sativex is, isn't it? The 1 to 1, and that I think would be far more effective. And then one more thing I'd like to add that we have had patients who have had dental work done, and they will put their CBD oil drops directly on like the socket, and it will heal faster, and it will also decrease the pain.
Uh, I think that might be interesting, because as Dr. Daniel Stein also pointed out, is that for some naive patients, we've seen in clinical studies that getting THC for the first time can sometimes increase their experience of pain acutely sometimes. Like can become more intense. So it'd be interesting.
Yeah.
So I'll put you on the spot there, trusted cannabis nurse. Inclusion, exclusion criteria. Do you want experienced cannabis users, whatever that may be, you're welcome to define it, but just throwing out a loaded
Mhm.
term, experienced cannabis user, whatever that is, would you want them in a study if you were studying your ideal product?
I think that I mean, if we're looking at real world applicability in the real world, millions of people are using THC on a daily basis. So I think if you can account for that and you have maybe a different arm that you have naive users and you have seasoned users and see
Huh.
what dose works for each group, I think that could be doable. I mean,
Yeah.
not yeah, of course, this is not actually doable out in the research world, but I'd like to
Yes,
see it.
we're in magic wand waving land. Like, what
Right.
would we, what would we like to
This
do?
this is our wish list. My wish list is to always have a placebo arm,
Yeah.
including a topical study. And I think there needs to be placebo arms,
Excellent. Yeah.
blinded, blinded.
And
Yeah,
finding ways to blind people to the products,
yeah,
I think is great, as well. And I've always been fascinated with the placebo effect and tricking people into,
right.
uh, you know, and I think we should have, I'd love to do a dental pain study where we have three CBD products that are all the same product, but one is really, really expensive. And we just tell people it's expensive. And
That study has been done with wine, you know. That
yeah,
study
yeah.
has been done with wine, and people always prefer the expensive one.
So, and
All
so
right,
maybe we didn't that, and we've talked about it. Epidiolex is expensive, but they maybe they should have told people they were using a really inexpensive CBD product. That
yeah,
maybe that would have affected the
well,
results somehow.
the
But
mind is very powerful for both side effects and benefits. So It's 1 o'clock. You want to get to the next announcements?
Oh,
What we're
yes.
going
I
to do?
just wanted, so thank you so
Yeah.
much for your questions, Megan. That's fantastic. I appreciate your participation in these so consistently. I always look forward to your comments. And for the rest of you for the chat as well, we want to let you know we are May 6th. We will be looking at the impact of healthcare provider awareness and guidance on the medical cannabis experience. Fascinating study. When healthcare professionals are aware of the use and what the patient is using and how they're using it, be it edibles, inhalable products, etc., what are some of the outcomes? Are there actually better outcomes when the doctors and healthcare professionals are more integrated? And sometimes a conversation about it actually can improve outcomes. It's fascinating, something that maybe sounds like common sense, but to actually see where it plays out and where it improves things is very interesting. June, we're going to dive into amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Ethan Russo put out a really interesting article about this. We have some perspectives about it. My mentor in grad school did some work on this with mice and treating them with THC and seeing their life sort of extend with that treatment. So we're going to bring some perspective and comments and explore this article as well as we are digesting Dr. Russo and Dr. Carter's explanation and discussion of this article. So we hope to share those with you. Of course, we're always open to any suggestions that you may have for content as well, or articles you'd like us to discuss. We're looking at some things for July and August as well. We're considering taking July off, giving you the month off from the Journal Club, but we'll see. We'll see. So we hope to see you on our next Journal Club on either May 6th or June 3rd. Bring your questions, bring your comments. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And Dr. Molloy, thank you as well. I appreciate
Thank you.
helping to pilot these Journal Clubs.
Gotcha.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.